And that's all she wrote for the 2025 college football regular season. I think I speak for all of us when I say it feels like every year goes by faster and faster and faster. But nonetheless, every team has played 12 games, and it is time to grade those teams based on those 12 games. That's right, in today's video, we are going to be grading every SEC team's full 2025 season. Pretty wild year for the SEC. Some teams are headed to the playoffs, and then some teams fired their coach. And we're going to cover all of that today, so without further ado, let's get started. All right, up first, we've got Alabama, and a solid season for the Crimson Tide. They get an A-. This team responded very well after the embarrassment to Florida State week 1. They found multiple ways to win in a ton of close games. They went into Athens and beat Georgia again. South Carolina had them on the ropes in the fourth quarter. They found a way to win that one. Beat all 3 of their rivals. They beat Tennessee, LSU, and Auburn, and those wins did not come easy. Got to give Alabama a lot of credit. I would have given them an A instead of an A- if it wasn't for the Oklahoma loss. I mean, just way too many turnovers in that game. If this team doesn't make mistakes in the playoffs, especially turnovers, they can win the national championship. Tons of playmakers on this Bama team. Horton and Bernard, great seasons. Alabama gets an A-. Next up, we've got Arkansas, and a disaster season for the Hogs. They get an F. Arkansas finishes 2-10 on the season. Sam Pittman was fired after week 4, and Bobby Petrino did not win a single game as the interim. They had chances to win some close games, but they choked every single one of them. Arkansas's defense was the worst in the entire conference. Just listen to this. They scored 42 against A&M, lost. Scored 37 against Texas, lost. Scored 35 against Ole Miss, lost. The one time the defense played decently, they lost to LSU because they couldn't score. 4 turnovers in that game. The embarrassing losses to Auburn and Mississippi State solidified themselves as the worst SEC team of the year. And I've seen a lot of mixed reactions from Arkansas fans on the Ryan Silverfield hire. Arkansas fans, let me know in the comments what you think about it. All right, next up, we've got my Auburn Tigers, and I'm giving us a D. 6 one-possession losses. We are a bunch of losers who don't know how to win. Hugh Freeze, my gosh, man. What in the world were you doing? The offense was absolutely embarrassing under Hugh Freeze, and once he got fired and DJ Durkin took over as the interim, the offense improved, but the defense got worse. DJ Durkin's defense at Auburn constantly chokes in the fourth quarter. They never show up in big-time moments. And this makes 5 losing seasons in a row for Auburn, the worst stretch in program history. I am disgusted. Hopefully, Golish can get us to 7-5 and we can have a winning season again. And we've got another team that fired their coach. Florida gets a D+. They finally fired Billy. But the interim, Billy Gonzalez, was not much better. The Gators go 4-8 with some very humiliating and embarrassing losses to Kentucky and Tennessee. The team had a pretty tough schedule, but they still drastically underachieved after the preseason hype. The tone for the season was pretty much set week 2 when they lost to USF at home, and it was just a disappointing season for Lagway. Jaden Ball was pretty much the only bright spot on offense. But I'm giving them a D+ instead of a D- or an F because they did have 2 pretty solid wins. They beat 9-3 Texas, and they embarrassed Florida State. Will Sumrall be Billy 2.0? Only time will tell. They are 2 completely different coaches personnel-wise, but Florida fans see a group of 5 coach from Louisiana, and yeah, do I need to say anything else? All right, next up, we've got Georgia, and I'm giving the Bulldogs an A. Another year of Georgia meeting the Georgia standard, 11-1, and a spot in the CFP locked and loaded. This team faced adversity multiple times and continuously found ways to win. The Tennessee, Auburn, Ole Miss, and Florida games that Georgia won in the fourth quarter, just freaking guts, man. They did lose to Bama at home, but they've got a shot at redemption this weekend in the SEC Championship. And what a year for Gunnar Stockton. 2,535 yards through the air, 20 touchdowns. Ran for 403 yards and tallied 8 touchdowns on the ground. And look, man, I'm just going to say it. Average subpar quarterback play is what prevented Georgia from winning the title last year and the year before. If Stockton shows up the way Bennett showed up in the 21 and 22 playoffs, don't be shocked if Georgia wins it all. All right, next up, we've got Kentucky. They're getting a D+. Not a good season for Kentucky, but they technically overachieved. They were picked to win 0 conference games, but they won 2. They went into Auburn under the lights and beat them, and then they just destroyed Florida at home. And they gave FCS Tennessee Tech their only loss on the year. They blew them out, too. But those 3 games were not enough for Kentucky to let Mark Stoops stick around. He was fired at the end of the season. Honestly, with all the coaching chaos that's been going on, I was worried Kentucky waited too long to pull the trigger. But they went out and hired Will Stein, the offensive coordinator out of Oregon. I think that's a good hire. With how Kentucky's kind of been struggling this season in basketball, they may give football some more NIL money. Next up, we've got LSU, and we are not grading who they hired. We are grading their season. and it was a disappointment. They get a C-. The season started off promising. They finally won a Week 1 game for the first time in years against Clemson, but then they dropped 2 games to Ole Miss and Vandy and then get embarrassed by A&M at home, and Brian Kelly gets fired. The offense was abysmal. Nuss was just not the guy that some LSU fans hoped he'd be. Play calling on offense was also terrible. They could just never get a rhythm going to complement the solid effort from the defense. But absolutely none of that matters because this season led to Brian Kelly's firing and potentially the biggest hire in LSU history. And speak of the devil, look who's next. Ole Miss. They get an A+. The most successful season in Ole Miss history deserves an A+. 11-1 with almost an entirely new team. They lost so many guys from last season, and they are headed to the playoffs. But let's address the elephant in the room. The biggest storyline revolving the program at this moment is not the historic season. It is Lane Kiffin leaving Ole Miss for LSU. And look, I'm not going to say Lane was right or Lane was wrong, but here's what I am going to say. College football has a massive problem. Early signing day is rushing these coaches to make decisions and move on from their team to their new team to lock down their December signing class. The season isn't over yet, man. We can't be doing this. I don't know if they're going to make a mandate where you can't take another job until the season is fully over, because you can't just take away early signing day. That's not going to happen. Rick Pitino put out a really good tweet about this. I'm about to read it. I'm not knocking football, but there's something wrong with their calendar. I'm at St. John's and we are potentially a 1 seed and can win a national championship this year, and I leave in March? What's going on here? But yeah, that's my take on the Lane Kiffin situation. I'm not saying Lane's right or wrong, but the system is flawed. All right, next up, we got Mississippi State, and yeah, they were pretty terrible. Giving them a D+. The upset win over Arizona State was the highlight of the season in Week 2. But this team found so many ways to lose, too many close games. Went into overtime at home against Tennessee and Texas. They lost both of those. And then they had Florida on the ropes in the swamp. And guess what? They choked. Ended the season playing 3 teams that were superior and did not compete in any of them. They were blown out by Georgia, Missouri, and Ole Miss. The offense showed a little bit of promise and improvement throughout the season, but the defense was absolute toast. I don't know if State fans are ready to call it quits on Levy just yet, but they do want Coleman Hutzler, the DC, fired immediately. All right, next up we got Missouri. I'm giving them a B-. Pretty much a chalk season for Mizzou. In Eli Drinkwitz fashion, they beat the teams they were supposed to beat and they lost to the teams they were supposed to lose to. Ahmad Hardy was the star of the season for the Tigers offense, but he never got the help from Mizzou's passing game against the good defenses they played. And Drinkwitz, man, he's still looking for his signature win against a really good team. I'm going to give him some credit for the 23 Cotton Bowl win over Ohio State, but the Buckeyes had basically half of their starters sitting out because of the draft. I can't even tell you off the top of my head what his best win is at Mizzou besides that one. I'm pretty sure they did go into Knoxville a few years ago and beat a pretty good Tennessee team pretty badly, but Drinkwitz better win a game or two he's not supposed to next season. All right, next up, we've got Oklahoma. They're getting an A. Massive win over Alabama and Tuscaloosa. Back-to-back years beating the Tide. And just like last year, they forced a handful of turnovers and capitalized on every opportunity. But the question is, can Mateer do enough against elite defenses in the playoffs to bolt Oklahoma to a title run? He played terrible against Texas and just did not capitalize on opportunities against Ole Miss. Someone who can capitalize on opportunities is Tate Sandell. This guy is a machine. If the Sooners need a long field goal to win a playoff game, they shouldn't be breaking a sweat. Next up is South Carolina, and they are getting an F. Now that Hugh Freeze is out of the conference, Shane Beamer takes the title of the biggest loser in the SEC. The A&M choke sums up all you need to know about this South Carolina team. This team, the coaches, the players, they have some of the worst body language I have ever seen a team have. Anytime they get down or when a game gets close, they just mope around and feel sorry for themselves. Mike Shula was not the problem. It was and is Shane Beamer. I knew after A&M scored that first touchdown, it was over. Those losers looked so defeated and so scared. If you didn't hammer A&M Moneyline live, what were you doing? Anyways, South Carolina finishes 4-8 after having pretty high expectations. The offensive and defensive line were terrible, and the fact that Beamer is still employed is baffling. All right, next up we've got Tennessee, and a pretty disappointing season for the Vols. They get a C+. They had a tough schedule, but they ultimately could not make enough plays to knock off 2 out of the 4 playoff teams they played. A missed game-winning field goal against Georgia, poor execution against Alabama, too many Aguilar turnovers against Oklahoma, and then a second-half collapse against Vanderbilt. If 2 of those were prevented, Tennessee would have made the playoffs. A positive that came from this season, though, was Tennessee finally ended its drought in the swamp, and they blew out Florida in Gainesville. But that's not enough to call it a successful season. Tennessee's new standard under Heupel was to make the playoffs, and they did not make enough plays to make that happen. Next up is Texas. I'm going to give the 9-3 Longhorns a B-. Coming into the season ranked number 1, Texas finishing 9-3 and most likely missing the playoffs is ultimately a disappointment. Although the offense did show improvement as the season went on, it was not good enough on certain days. Sark said it would be a disservice to college football if Texas doesn't get in the CFP because of the Ohio State loss. But to that I say, don't lose to Billy Napier. With how terrible Florida was this season, there is no reason a playoff team should have a loss to Florida on its record. I'm sorry. Other than that, though, a solid season for Texas. Wins over Oklahoma, Vandy, and A&M, but a bad loss to Florida and a blowout loss to Georgia is what's going to cost them a playoff spot. Next up, Texas A&M, a historic season for the Aggies. They get an A. After a massive win on the road at Notre Dame Week 3, A&M cruised to an 11-0 start. And I know I was dogging on South Carolina earlier, but I got to give A&M a ton of credit as well. Even though South Carolina is terrible, a 27-point comeback in the second half is crazy. Aggies drop one to Texas on the road to end the regular season. Not the best performance out of Marcel Reed. We'll see what adjustments A&M makes after this loss headed into the playoffs. I'm going to go ahead and predict that they will win their first-round game at home. All right, lastly, we've got Vanderbilt, and the Commodores get an A+. This is absolutely criminal that Vanderbilt is going to finish 10-2 in the SEC and may or may not make the playoffs. Probably not. I mean, just what an amazing season from Vanderbilt. A statue of Pavia needs to be built. The Vandy culture has completely changed thanks to Clark Lee. Vanderbilt is no longer the laughingstock of the SEC and won't be for a long time, if ever again. Commodores lost to 2 good teams on the road, won many games in gutsy fashion. This team is just a bunch of winners. But my God, the fact that they are not in the playoffs is actually pissing me off. We have got to change this playoff format. We're going to have 10-2 Vanderbilt left out, 10-2 Miami left out, so Tulane and Virginia, or maybe Duke, can get in the playoffs. What are we doing? This conference champion rule is really stupid. I knew this was going to happen as soon as they announced it. We've got teams that aren't one of the 12 best teams, in this case, 2 of the 12 best teams, but they technically won their conference, so we have to put them in. And also, this isn't related to Vanderbilt, but how is Miami 10-2, Notre Dame is 10-2, Miami beat Notre Dame, but yet Notre Dame is going to get in and Miami is going to get left out? It's just so dumb. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this video. The 2025 SEC season grades. I can't believe it's over, but hey, all that means is that it's about playoff time. That's all I've got for today. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Tell me how you think your team did this season, and if you're one of the 6 teams that have a new head coach, let me know how you feel about your new coach. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.